97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew Dicecco. Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
You know, we recognize the ability of the roster that's put together right now. And I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia studios, it's Football at 4.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Andrew Dicecco covers the Eagles for 97.3 ESPN.com and the InsideTheBirds.com. Eagles lose to the Cowboys. Playoff hopes are over, but they can still ruin things for Washington. No Dwayne Haskins for Washington moving forward. It's going to be either Alex Smith or Taylor Heineke, or depending on what sports station you listen to. Apparently the guy has 2 or 3 different pronunciations of his name. So bad for that guy. We'll get more into the Eagles and what it means for the team coming up next, as they are now officially out of the playoffs. With Andrew Dicecco as all guests, he appears on the Boardwalk kind of hotline. Andrew, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Josh. Lots to talk about here, so it's I don't know where the Eagles go from here.
I don't think any of us really know, so let's at least focus on what we do know. One of the things we do know is that the Eagles, once Fletcher Cox left the game, were outscored 34-3. Now, we know Fletcher Cox is an important player for this team. But getting outscored 34-3, how much of that really was the defense and how much of that was the offense failing?
Well, I think it was a culmination of things. I mean, what we saw yesterday was a 2-week Band-Aid that can no longer mask the litany of deficiencies on that football team. Look, the offensive game plan was largely flawed, and Pederson again struggled to combat Dallas' second-half adjustments. The team demonstrated a lack of readiness and discipline again. An undermanned defense didn't help themselves with missed tackles and blown assignments. By the time Jim Schwartz adjusted and got Michael Jacquet out of the game, it was too late. And aside from a strong opening, the quarterback play wasn't good enough. He was pressing once the defense settled in and adapted, and he fumbled twice. That's essentially the Eagles' 2020 season personified.
Yeah, when I look at Doug Pederson, because he to me was such a huge problem yesterday, the biggest. 4-6 2 years ago, 5-7 last year, and they battled back. It was great. They find the ways to win 4 straight games or win a bunch of games to put them in playoff contention. This year, they fell short of that. Is this what Doug Pederson is? This is what he does. He fall behinds early, and then he rallies the troop, which, give him credit, the troops do rally in terms of staying involved with his, mentality and his message, but it's not sustainable.
No, it's not sustainable, and he routinely struggles to make these adjustments, and you have to wonder, is his voice getting stale? Is that message no longer resonating in that locker room? You can only kind of just have to play December football and have your backs against the wall so many times before teams are like, okay, eventually that's not going to work. That's not a winning formula. And, in my opinion, I think it's time for a change at the head coaching spot, and I don't know if that happens. Ultimately, if you listen to Doug Pederson today, he seemed pretty confident that he was going to be back. But I think it's best for everyone involved if they move forward with a new head coach.
How much do you really think, though, is Doug, and how much of it is things outside Doug's control? Because I just have to wonder. I always ask this question when it comes to sports. Yeah, okay, you fire fill in the blank coach, but is the person you're replacing him with actually going to be better than said coach? And I'm really worried that if the Eagles were to move on from Doug, do you get a guy in here and that guy falls flat on his face?
Yeah, well, there's always going to be that concern, Josh, when you any head coaching positions. But otherwise, if you have that mindset, why make a coaching change at all in any franchise? There's always going to be that risk that grass may not always be greener on the other side of the fence. But I think right now, when you look at some of the things that they can do, their hands are certainly tied with what they can do with Carson Wentz. And I think you need to get a new head coach in there, get a new voice, bring a new staff in there. And, depending on who you're moving forward with, getting kind of rehabilitating in the case of Carson Wentz, and, maybe just reaffirming some things that Jalen Hurts does well, and working on some of the things that he doesn't do well, such as ball security and pressing like he did yesterday. So I think that's what's needed for this football team.
Is there a name out there that intrigues you? Of course, Bieniemy is one, and a lot of people are starting to pick out at some of the Kansas City coaching staffs. But is there a name out there? Because everyone's going to be in play for a Bieniemy. So, just is there a name out there for you?
Yeah, I like Brian Dable with the Buffalo Bills. I think he's done a really nice job with Josh Allen. Arthur Smith with the Tennessee Titans. He was a first-year play caller, I believe, last season, and you saw what he's done with that. I think he's ready to take that next step. The guy who I really like is Mike Kafka, the OC for the Kansas City Chiefs. But, why would he move? I don't necessarily know if he's ready to make the leap yet, and why would he move to come over here for an offensive coordinator position? He's being groomed in Kansas City, I think, to be Andy Reid's eventual successor. So those are just a couple of names for offensive coordinator. I like Graham Harrell, the OC at USC.
Andrew Dicecco joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. You can follow Andrew on Twitter at @Dicecco NFL. Andrew, speaking of the coaches, we were talking with Scott Grayson an hour ago, and he mentioned he thinks Doug Pederson keeps his job, and maybe Jim Schwartz loses his job. Do you have a personal perspective on who you would rather keep if you had to remove one of them from the picture? Would it be Schwartz or would it be Pederson?
Well, and I can certainly see where Scott's coming from there, but you have to look at Jim Schwartz and what he's had to work with. He was playing with Michael Jacquet out there. He was playing with Kayvon Wallace, Mark Epps, Joe Bocci, who a lot of people don't even know who number 59 was, T.Y. McGill. That's not necessarily players that you want out there for 5 snaps a game, let alone, the amount that they were playing, 18 to 20, and in some cases more. I think he's done a decent job masking some of the areas of the deficiencies and making it a respectable defense. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors involved with Jim Schwartz, but I think if you're picking between the two, I think it's got to be Doug that you have to look to move on from, because the overall structure of the team, and their lack of readiness, their undisciplined play that continuously happens, I think you have to look at Doug.
I would agree with you. With Jim Schwartz, everyone sees the 37 points and they say, the loss is on the defense. But it's pretty damning to see you score 14 points early and then on this specific defense only be able to get 3 more points. It just can't happen. But you mentioned the lack of discipline. And Isaac Seumalo had a couple penalties. Zach Ertz had a couple penalties. And with Fletcher Cox, he's someone who stands out to me as someone who will battle through injury. But with the stinger, with the season on the line, I'm not questioning his toughness because he's in that category of Kelsey, Lane Johnson to me where he battles through things. But you look at some of the veterans in this core, and it's a little concerning to me to know that there was a little bit of lack of discipline with those guys specifically.
Yeah, you're right. And I guess it's fair to wonder if some of those guys may have checked out. You're seeing these errors coming from veteran players. This is a playoff game for this team. This is a must-win game. And to come out and execute so poorly, that speaks to just the overall lack of discipline and that all stems from the head coach. You can't have veteran players routinely make these mistakes. It's going to happen here and there, but there was one point where it was just back to back to back. It's like, what's going on here? It was like you're stuck in neutral.
There was a few weeks ago, Broads and I were on the air together, and I threw out the bizarro world theory of what if you kept Jim Schwartz, made him the head coach, and brought in an offensive coordinator, and Schwartz would do the OC what Doug has done to Jim, which is say, hey, you run the offense, I'll take care of the defense, and maybe that job would be appealing to someone like a Graham Harrell or someone to say, listen, the offense is all yours, just let me run my defense.
I think that would not be the best route to go, getting a retread. We've seen what Jim Schwartz is as a head coach. It didn't quite work out in Detroit. I think that if you bring in any head coach, offensive-minded in particular, they're only going to come here if you offer them, they're going to bring their staff in there. And I think that's the route that they need to go. There's a lot of guys out there that would, kind of remodel that whole offense and make it much more fluid than what it is. And like Hunter was saying, I think Jim Schwartz has done a decent job given what he's had to work with. So I think that he ultimately stays on board, and I think you need to look at a new guy, a new head coach that's going to have a new voice for this team.
Jim Schwartz was one of only 2 coaches in the last 20 years to get the Lions to the postseason, so maybe he's not totally horrible as a head coach, but I digress, Hunter.
Yeah, when I look at this, and I looked at Jalen Hurts' performance, it felt like what I saw with Carson Wentz, as if the head coaching was a problem, getting away from the game plan. You saw it work in the first drive. Then they elected to not run the ball. 8 carries in the first quarter for Sanders, 7 the rest of the way. The offensive line abysmal. Skill players not playing good. So it just felt like the surrounding pieces, similar to what I said when Wentz was under center, was happening with Hurts as well. And that's not to take away some of the flaws that he had personally, but I really did feel like the spark, the fuse, it went away, and you saw the natural issues again with this football team, and it really hurt Jalen Hurts' play.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, Hunter. When you have a quarterback like Carson Wentz, who pretty much fell off a cliff this season, there was a clear regression. Then you look at Jalen Hurts, and you're seeing some of the same errors start to happen. You almost want to, if you do move forward with either quarterback, which one you go forward with, you almost want Doug Pederson and Press Taylor and those guys as far away from these guys as possible, because they're making similar mistakes, and that stems from coaching.
You mentioned Press Taylor. I still don't understand why this guy has a job on this team, aside from the fact that supposedly, him and I think Doug Pederson have the same agent or something like that. But he was a Chip Kelly guy. I mean, is this guy a legitimate NFL coach, or is he just hanging around because he knows the right people?
Well, based on what I've seen, I mean, it's not working here in Philadelphia. It's not for me to say if he's an NFL quality coach, but I mean, it's not working here. Whatever role they put him in, I think it's time to look. You got that's an area that if they do keep Doug Pederson on board, you got to get an offensive coordinator in there, and you have to get a new quarterbacks coach. That has to be the first things that happen.
And it definitely does seem how Doug has been talking. It does seem like him and Jeffrey Lurie had the conversation where he seems comfortable with stating being part of the solution. But the last question of his press conference today stood out to me. The question was asked by Rob Maaddi, and it was about him being more involved with some of the evaluation stuff. And this was his response. I want to get your thoughts. Doug wants to be a part of the solution, a part of the evaluation process, a voice that is heard. Communication with Howie and his staff is important in terms of the personnel. Is that just a bad answer by Doug because he's naturally bad in front of the microphone? Or is he telling us he doesn't have much say when it comes to the roster and it's not as much of a collaboration as we thought?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, Hunter. I think it's one of those deals where he was trying to voice him, like he was trying to be vocal without throwing Howie Roseman under the bus. That was coaches speak for, hey, I can get me involved here and let me have some say in who's going to be on this football team. And he said, I can be a part of the solution. And that's kind of how I took that, is give him a little bit more say, a little bit more authority in who he can have on his football team. And he believes that he can steerhead it, helps redirect it in the right direction.
Now, considering that right direction, the Eagles are no longer in the postseason. So what is a legitimate expectation of this team heading into a game that is the most strange situation I've ever seen? Mm-hmm. You have them being flexed in the Sunday Night Football. One of the two teams has no chance at the postseason. So it all to the purpose, the Eagles could just go out there and be like, we're not playing anybody and hand Washington the division. Or they could turn around and say, we're going to play everybody. We beat the Washington. We take them out of the division, but it means nothing for us. I mean, what is a legitimate expectation of this team as we're 6 days away from arguably the most important meaningless game in the history of the franchise?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be Jalen Hurts going up against Taylor Heineke. And I saw earlier today that Terry McLaurin has a high ankle sprain. So that's their top receiver. That's one of their.
He's in a walking boot, Andrew. He's in a walking boot. I mean, what the heck's going on here?
And that's one of the guys you're going to tune in to see, of course, and Antonio Gibson over there. But I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if I had to guess, Josh, what I think is going to happen, they're not just going to go out there and make it a preseason finale. I think that they're going to make it more like the dress rehearsal, a third preseason game where you see the starters play a decent amount, and then you're going to see them start to kind of give way for some of these young guys, these Michael Jacquettes, the Joe Bocci's, the Sean Bradley, if he's available. Davion Taylor might be available next week. Kayvon Wallace, Marcus Epps, Elijah Riley, the backup safety. I think you're going to see some of those guys start to get worked in there so that they have some tape on these guys, this game action, and they can see where they're at and they can evaluate from there.
All right, you mentioned the young guys. What have you seen out of Jalen Reagor, because I was someone who was intrigued by his skill set. Everyone wrote him off because he wasn't Justin Jefferson without even seeing him play. That bothered me. I said, give the kid some time, and I'm not writing him off. But I think it's fair to say, even though he had an injury, he has been very underwhelming. And I don't know if you see something in the route running, but it does seem like there's always this miscommunication, as if he's not giving it his all or he's not breaking the right way. There is something off with Jalen Reagor. So what do you see?
Well, I agree with you. I remember before the season, you and I were very intrigued by Jalen Reagor. I actually thought that he was going to be utilized similar to how the 49ers used Deebo Samuel. Obviously, that hasn't happened. Some of that's on Jalen being injured, and some of that is just flat out he's not making the plays when he's in position to make the plays. He doesn't have the necessary play strength. He gets squeezed on these vertical routes. He doesn't fight for position with the football. You saw yesterday when he got the ball in open field, he's supposed to be an open field specialist. He had a convoy of blockers in front of him, and he ran right into the tackle. When I look at Jalen Reagor, I don't see a first-round talent. I just don't see that special quality. Do you expect every first-round pick to go out there and be a Justin Jefferson? Of course not. But you at least want to see some flashes of somebody who's special, and I'm just not seeing that from Jalen Reagor. He's not running NFL. He doesn't look like he's ready to run NFL routes. And his body language is terrible. And these are areas of concern when you're evaluating your first round pick. I mean, to me, that he could have been that what you're seeing on the field, you could get that in the third or fourth or fifth round. I mean, Quez Watkins is a more explosive player at this stage in both of their careers.
So then how much of what we're seeing from Reagor also falls back on coaching? Because you mentioned Reagor's body language. We saw Matt Pryor not once but twice but 3 times have false starts. Sayamalo in the dumbest hold I've seen this season. I mean, how much of the problems we're seeing from the players with the body language and the mistakes also should fall on the coaching?
Yeah, but in regards to Reagor, I mean, his immediate, the guy who he reports to is Aaron Moorhead. And how many times are you going to keep swapping out receivers coaches? I believe they went through 6 in 6 years before you have to look at, is it a coaching issue or is it a talent issue? Is it an evaluation issue? I mean, in the case of J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, I think it was a poor evaluation for sure. And I think that when you look at Jalen Reagor, some of the mistakes that he's making, I mean, you're not seeing guys like Quez Watkins make those mistakes. And he was a 6th round pick. Jalen Reagor just doesn't seem like a polished product. And I don't know if there's any kind of coaching that can solve, poor body language. And, Jalen has to want to get better. And he seems like a hardworking kid. And this offseason is going to be extremely telling. But, it's hard to put all that on coaching, and you have to give some of the accountability to the player.
Keeping it with the wide receivers, Deshaun Jackson, this debacle. One play, it's outstanding. You get the home run hit. He does the front flip in the end zone. You never see him again. What is this Deshaun Jackson debacle?
Yeah, as soon as I saw that play, as soon as I saw him do that flip, I said, well, I guess we're not going to see him again because, knowing his history, you're like, well, I guess we'll see Deshaun in another uniform, and thanks for the memories. But he played 20 snaps. Doug Pederson said that the flip didn't translate to his soreness that held him out for the majority of that game. But I think the Deshaun, you can close the book on the Deshaun era here in Philadelphia. I think that's kind of run its course. It wasn't what either party really expected to get out of the reuniting. And I think that you just gotta make way for these younger players and thank him for his time and what he's done for the franchise and move on because it's just not working out.
Yeah, for me, I think the more important takeaway from what's happening with Deshaun here in this last game and Fletcher is the message. So Fletch, it's all right, take your pads off. With Deshaun, it's all right, you're going to sit down. The message sent to these younger players, to the team is we're in a playoff spot. You guys, hey, take a seat. You're off for the night. I mean, what type of message is that? That's what bothers me. Don't you want to go out there and compete, show everybody else that this is a game that matters? It didn't seem like the sense of urgency was there from the veterans, and to me, that is such a big problem.
Yeah, it is, and you can even look further back when Jason Peters went into Doug Pederson's office and said, he wanted to play, left tackle, or he wanted to raise, whatever it was. And, you just have a lot of entitlement with some of these veteran players. And I think that it sends such a poor message to a young player. We talked about Jalen Reagor's body language. Well, how do you think something like that is going to resonate with a young player? Some of these veterans need to lead by example, and you're not necessarily seeing that. And I think that whole leadership, that goes back to what we were talking about in the open. That goes back to it's all tied directly to the head coach and the message that's being told to the locker room.
Andrew Dicecco, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. You can follow Andrew on Twitter at @Dicecco NFL. Also check out all of his coverage of the Eagles at 97.3 ESPN.com and InsideTheBirds.com. Now, Andrew, you also cover the NFL draft. So with all that being said, currently the Eagles are projected to hold the 6th overall pick in the 2021 NFL draft. I've seen 2 mock drafts that say the Eagles would be taking Patrick Surtain from Alabama. Now, I love the pick because I think Surtain is the best corner in college football. But you cover the NFL draft. You've been doing it for years. How do you feel about Surtain? And is there another person who would be available at 6 overall that would intrigue you possibly more?
Well, depending on how things shake out this week, the Eagles could have as high as the number 3 overall pick. In that case, I would go with the offensive tackle Penei Sewell from Oregon. Now, at pick 6, I think you need to look at, everyone's enamored with the Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith from Alabama. There's too many holes. You have to go for, in my opinion, cornerback, or maybe a guy like a Micah Parsons, because the Eagles right now, just look at the depth chart. They have no building blocks on defense. They have 0 building blocks. Everyone that's there, that's a prominent player on that unit, is on the back end of their NFL careers, or on the back 9. So I like Patrick Surtain. I also like J.C. Horn from South Carolina. Surtain is just an instinctive, nosy defender. He can cover, he can flip his hips and run, and he has that. His father, of course, was Patrick Surtain, and so I mean, I think he's NFL ready and a plug and play guy. He's obviously played at a high level in college, and in my opinion, it's got to be either him, J.C. Horn, Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech. It's got to be one of those guys, because you saw what happened yesterday when you don't have a competent number 2. You can move Darius Slay around all you want to, but when they have that guy on the other side, they're going to keep attacking him until the Eagles find an answer. Now,
you mentioned Chase and Sewell and Parsons. Those are guys who they didn't see a lot of action this year. You didn't get a lot of tape on them this year. So how does that change potential evaluations for those guys? Because if you don't got game tape on them for a year, that might change how people perceive them.
Yeah, I think that would more so hurt guys that were first-round tweeners, back-end guys, fringe first-round guys. But when you put the body of work out there that Jamar Chase did on a national platform, and just be that unique skill set of a Micah Parsons, who really fits the mold of what the NFL is really becoming on defense. He can play linebacker, but you can put him in the slot. He can match up with these hybrid tight ends and cover running backs out of the backfield. He's just a movable chess piece, and on a defense that's really getting older and a little long in the tooth, and doesn't really have any building blocks, as I mentioned. I think that he needs consideration there.
He's Andrew Dicecco. Give him a follow on Twitter, @Dicecco NFL. He joins us each Monday here at Football at 4 on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. This week, Andrew will be back with us on Wednesday for Football at 4. Jeff Mosher will jump on a Tuesday. So we'll hear from Andrew one more time on Wednesday as we start looking ahead to the Washington football team. And nobody knows who's actually playing for Washington. So it'll be a fun conversation, Andrew.
Yeah, fun and interesting for sure.
Have a good one.
You too, guys.
Football at 4 here on 97.3 ESPN, being brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now, and the match first buys up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com and win real money with their sports book, along with casino games from the comfort of your home. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.